All right, welcome back, everybody, to another stream of the Goodnight reading series for Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I hope you're all doing well and you're all snuggled up and ready to relax and listen to me read more of Jane Eyre, and hopefully, I do put you to sleep. I know I do my best with what I can. This is a book that I've never really read before. I do know the story, so my intent was always to be able to use this stream as a way for people to kind of relax, unwind, and just fall asleep. So I do hope that you guys enjoy this story and you enjoy me reading. I know I'm not the best, I'm not a professional. This is just something I want to do for fun. So, with that being said, last time we were here, we ended up reading about Jane Eyre and how she ended up leaving her mother's, well, not her mother's, her aunt's house, Mrs. Reed's house. She went to Lowood School and she got to see the hardy lifestyle everybody's living. So now she's part of that, and she's really determined to excel at the school. And she's made friends with someone else named Burns, and she really likes talking to this girl. And she also really likes one of her teachers, and she really likes the superintendent specifically. So it's definitely an experience for Jane, what she's kind of going through. She's already been kind of, treated not so great by the owner of the school, Mr. Brocklehurst. So he ended up putting her on display, saying she's wicked and nobody should talk to her and all these things. And, she felt really bad about it. But it was nice, though, that the superintendent found out that Jane was not a liar and a lot of the things Jane talked about were true. So Jane feels very vindicated in that way. And she's been just kind of feeling very strongly about being at school and being at school. So that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of where we left off of. And we're going to see what happens tonight. So let's get back to it. Chapter 9. But the privations, or rather the hardships of Lowood, lessened. Spring drew on, and she was indeed ready to come. The frosts of winter had ceased, its snows were melted, its cutting winds ameliorated. My wretched feet, flayed and swollen to lamenessness by the sharp air of January, began to heal and subside under the gentler breathings of April. The nights and mornings no longer by their Canadian temperature froze the very blood in our veins. We were now to endure the play hour passed in the garden. Sometimes on a sunny day it began even to be pleasant and genial, and the greenness grew over those brown beds, which, freshening daily, suggested the thought that hope traversed them at night, and left each morning brighter traces of her steps. Flowers peeped out amongst the leaves, snowdrops, crocuses, purple auriculas, and golden-eyed pansies. On Thursday afternoons we took walks, and found still sweeter flowers opening by the wayside, under the hedges. I discovered, too, what a great pleasure and an enjoyment that the horizon only bounded lay outside the high and spiked guarded walls of our garden. This pleasure consisted in a prospect of noble summits, girdling a great hill hollow, rich in verdure and shadow, in a bright beck, full of dark stones and sparkling eddies. How different had this scene looked when I viewed it, and laid out beneath the iron sky of winter, stiffened in frost and shrouded with snow. When mists as chill as death wandered to the impulse of the east winds along those purple peaks, and rolled down and home till they blended with the frozen fog of the beck. That beck itself was then a torrent, turbid and curbless. It tore asunder the wood and sent raving sound through the air, often thickened with a wild rain or whirling sleet, and for the forest on its banks that showed only ranks of skeletons. April advanced to May. A bright, serene May it was. Days of blue sky, placid sunshine, and soft western or southern gales filled up its duration. And now vegetation matured with vigor. Low wood shook loose its tresses. It became all green and all flowery. Its great elm, ash, and oak skeletons were restored to majestic life. Woodland plants sprang up profusely in its recesses. Unnumbered varieties of moss filled its hollows, and it made a strange ground sunshine out of the wealth of its wild primrose plants. I have seen their pale gold gleam in the overshadowed spots like scatterings of the sweetest luster. All this I enjoyed often and fully, free, unwatched, and almost alone. For this unwanton liberty and pleasure there was a cause, to which it now becomes my task to avert. I have not described a pleasant site for a dwelling. When I speak of it as it blossomed in the hill and the wood, and rising from the verge of a stream, assuredly pleasant enough, but whether healthy or not is another question. The forest dell where Lowood lay was the cradle of fog, and fog breath bred pestilence, which, quickening with the quickening spring, crept into the orphan asylum, breathed typhus through its crowded schoolroom and dormitory, and ere May arrived, transformed the seminary into a hospital. Semi-starvation and neglected colds had been predisposed for most of the pupils to receive infection. 45 out of the 80 girls lay ill at one time. Classes were broken up, rules were relaxed. The few who continued well were allowed almost unlimited license, because the medical attendant insisted on the necessity of frequent exercise to keep them in health, and it had been otherwise no one had leisure to watch or restrain them. Miss Temple's whole attention was absorbed by the patients. She lived in the sick room, never quitting it except to snatch a few hours' rest at night. The teachers were fully occupied with packing up and making other necessary preparations for the departure of those girls who were fortunate enough to have friends and relations available and willing to remove them from the seat of contagion. Many already smitten went home only to die. Some died at the school and were buried quietly and quickly. The nature of the malady was forbidding delay. While disease had thus become an inhabitant of Lowood, and death its frequent visitor, while there was gloom and fear within the walls, while its rooms and passages steamed with hospital smells, the drug and the pastille, striving vainly to overcome the effluvia of mortality, that bright May shone unclouded over the bold hills and the beautiful woodland out of the doors. Its garden, too, glowed with flowers. Hollyhocks had sprung up as tall as trees. Lilies had opened. Tulips and roses were in bloom. The borders of the little beds were gay with pink thrift and crimson double daisies. The sweetbriars gave out morning and evening, their scent of spice and apples, and these fragrant treasures were all useless for most of the inmates of Lowood, except to furnish now and then a handful of herbs and blossoms to put on a coffin. But I, and the rest of those who continued well, enjoyed fully the beauties of the scene and the season. They let us ramble in the wood like gypsies. From morning till night, we did what we liked. We were better off, and we lived better, too, for this. Mr. Brocklehurst and his family never came near Lowood now. Household matters were not scrutinized into. The cross housekeeper was gone, driven away by the fear of infection. Her successor, who had been the matron at Lowton Dispensary, unused to the ways of her new abode, provided with comparative liberality. Besides, there were fewer to feed. The sick could eat little. Our breakfast basins were better filled. When there was no time to prepare a regular dinner, which often happened, she would give us a large piece of cold pie or a thick slice of bread and cheese, and this we carried away with us into the woods, where we chose a spot we liked best and dined sumptuously. My favorite seat was a smooth and broad stone, rising white and dry from the very middle of the beck, and only to be got at by wading through water, a feat that I accomplished barefoot. The stone was just broad enough to accommodate comfortably another girl and me. At that time my chosen comrade was one Mary Ann Wilson, a shrewd, observant personage, whose society I took pleasure in, partly because she was witty and original, and partly because she had a manner which set me at ease. Some years older than I, she was. She knew more of the world, and could tell me many things that I liked to hear. With her, my curiosity found gratification. To my faults she also gave ample indulgence, never imposing curb or rein on anything that I said. She had a turn for narrative, I for analysis. She liked to inform, and I to question. So we got on swimmingly together, deriving much entertainment, if not much improvement, from our mutual intercourse. And where, in the meantime, was Helen Burns? Why did I not spend these sweet days of liberty with her? Had I forgotten her, or was I so worthless to have grown tired of her pure society? Surely the Mary Ann Wilson that I had mentioned prior was inferior to my first acquaintance. She could only tell me amusing stories and reciprocate any racy and pungent gossip that I chose to indulge in, while, if I have spoken truth of Helen, she was qualified to give those who enjoyed the privilege of her converse a taste of far higher things. True, reader, and I knew and felt this. And though I am a defective being, with many faults and few redeeming points, yet I have never tired of Helen Burns, nor ever ceased to cherish for her a sentiment of attachment, as strong, tender, and respectful as any other animated my heart. How could it be otherwise when Helen, at all times and under all circumstance, evinced me a quiet and faithful friendship, which ill humor never soured, nor irritation never troubled? But Helen was ill at present. For some weeks she had been removed from my sight, to I knew not what room upstairs. She was not, as I was told, in the hospital portion of the house with fever patients, but for her complaint was consumption, not typhus, and by consumption I, in my ignorance, understood something mild, which time and care should be sure to alleviate. I was confirmed in this idea by the fact of her once or twice coming downstairs on very warm sunny afternoons and being taken by Miss Temple into the garden. But on these occasions I was not allowed to go and speak to her. I only saw her from the schoolroom window, and then not distinctly, for she was much wrapped up and sat at a distance under the veranda. One evening in the beginning of June I had stayed out very late with Mary Ann in the wood. We had, as usual, separated ourselves from the others, and we had wandered far, so far that we lost our way, and had to ask at a lonely cottage, where a man and woman had lived, who looked after a herd of wild swine that fed on the mast in the wood. When we got back it was after moonrise. A pony, which we knew to be the surgeon's, was standing at the garden door. Mary Ann remarked that she was supposed someone must be very ill, as Mr. Bates had been sent for a time of the evening. She went into the house, and I stayed behind a few minutes to plant in my garden a handful of roots that I had dug up in the forest, and which I feared would wither if I left them till morning. This done, I lingered yet a little. The flowers smelt so sweetly, and the dew fell. It was such a pleasant evening, so serene, so warm. The still glowing west promised another fine day on the morrow. The moon rose with such majesty and such the grave east. I was noting these things and enjoying them as a child might, when it entered my mind, as it had never done before. How sad to be lying in a sick bed and to be in danger of dying. This world is pleasant. It would be dreary to be called from it, and to have nowhere to go, and who knows where. And then my mind made its first earnest effort to comprehend what had been effused into a concerning heaven and hell. And for the first time it recoiled, baffled, and for the first time glancing behind, on each side, and before it, it saw all round an unfathomable gulf. It felt the one point where it stood, the present, and all the rest was formless cloud and vacant depth, and it shuddered at the thought of tottering, and plunging amid that chaos. While pondering this new idea, I heard the front door open. Mr. Bates came out, and with him was a nurse. After she had seen him mount his horse and depart, she was about to close the door, but I ran up to her. "How is Helen Burns?" "Very poorly," was the answer. Is it her Mr. Bates has been to see? Yes. And what does he say about her? He says she'll not be here long. This phrase, uttered in my hearing yesterday, would have only conveyed the notion that she was about to be removed to Northumberland, to her own home. I should not have suspected that it meant she was dying, but I knew instantly now. It opened clear on my comprehension that Helen Burns was numbering her last days in this world, and that she was going to be taken to the region of spirits, if such a region there were. I experienced a shock of horror, then a strong thrill of grief, then a desire, a necessity to see her, and I asked in what room that she lay. She is in Miss Temple's room, said the nurse. May I go up and speak to her? Oh, no, child. It is not likely, and now it is time for you to come in. You'll catch fever if you step out when the dew is falling. The nurse closed the front door, and I went in by the side entrance, which led to the schoolroom. I was just in time. It was 9 o'clock, and Miss Miller was calling the pupils to go to bed. It might be 2 hours later, probably near 11, when I, not having been able to fall asleep, and deeming from the perfect silence of the dormitory that my companions were wrapped in profound repose, rose softly, put on my frock over my night-dress, and without shoes, crept from the apartment, and set off in quest of Miss Temple's room. It was quiet at the other end of the house, but I knew my way, and the light of the unclouded summer moon, entering here and there at the passage windows, enabled me to find it without difficulty. An odor of camphor and burnt vinegar warned me when I came near the fever room, and as I passed its door, quickly, fearful lest the nurse who sat up all night should hear me, I dreaded being discovered and sent back, for I must see Helen. I must embrace her before she died. I must give her one last kiss, exchange with her one last word. Having descended a staircase, traversed a portion of the house below, and succeeded in opening and shutting, without noise, 2 doors, I reached another flight of steps. These I mounted, and then just opposite me was Miss Temple's room. A light shone through the keyhole, and from under the door a profound stillness pervaded the vicinity. Coming near, I found the door slightly ajar, probably to admit some fresh air into the close abode of sickness. Indisposed to hesitate and full of impatient impulses, soul and senses quivering with the keen throes, I put it back and looked in. My eye sought Helen and feared to find death. Close by Miss Temple's bed, and half covered with its white curtains, there stood a little crib. I saw the outline of a form under the clothes, but the face was hid by the hangings. The nurse that I had spoken to in the garden sat in an easy-chair asleep. An unsnuffed candle burnt nimbly on the table, but Miss Temple was not to be seen. I knew afterwards that she had been called to a delirious patient in the fever room. I advanced, and then paused by the crib side. My hand was on the curtain, but I preferred speaking before I withdrew it. I still recoiled at the dread of seeing a corpse. "Helen," I whispered softly, "are you awake?" She stirred herself, put back the curtain, and I saw her face, pale, wasted, but quite composed. She looked so little changed that my fear was instantly dissipated. "Oh, can it be you, Jane?" she asked in her own gentle voice. "Oh," I thought, "she is not going to die. They are mistaken, and she could not speak and look so calmly if she were." I got on to her crib and kissed her. Her forehead was cold, and her cheek both cold and thin, and so were her hand and wrist, but she smiled as if old. "Why have you come here, Jane? It's past 11 o'clock. I heard it strike some minutes since." "I came to see you, Helen. I heard you were very ill, and I could not sleep till I had spoken to you." "You came to bid me good-bye, then? Oh, you are just in time, probably." "Are you going somewhere, Helen? Are you going home?" "Yes, to my long home, my last home." "No, no, Helen." I stopped, distressed, while I tried to devour my tears, A fit of coughing seized Helen. It did not, however, wake the nurse. When it was over, she lay some minutes exhausted. Then she whispered, "Jane, your little feet are bare. Lie down and cover yourself with my quilt." I did so. She put her arm over me, and I nestled close to her. After a long silence, she resumed, still whispering, "I am very happy, Jane, and when you hear that I am dead, you must be sure and not grieve. There is nothing to grieve about. We must all die one day, and the illness which is removing me is not painful. It is gentle and gradual. My mind is at rest. I leave no one to regret me much. I only have a father, and he is lately married and will not miss me. By dying young, I shall escape great sufferings. I had not qualities or talents to make my way very well in this world. I should have been continually at fault. But where are you going to go, Helen? Can you see? Do you know? I believe that I have faith, and that I'm going to God." "But where is God? What is God?" My Maker and yours. You will never destroy what He created. I may rely implicitly on His power and confide wholly in His goodness. I count the hours till that eventful one arrives, which shall restore me to Him, reveal me to Him." "Are you sure then, Helen, that there is no such place as heaven, that there is such a place as heaven, and that our souls can get to it when we die?" "I am sure that there is a future state. I believe that God is good, and I can resign my immortal part to Him without any misgiving. God is my Father. God is my friend. I love Him. I believe He loves me. And I shall see you again, Helen, when I die. You will come to the same region of happiness and be received by the same mighty universal parent. No doubt, oh my dear Jane." Then I questioned, but this time only in thought, "Where is that region? Does it exist?" And then I clasped my arms closer around Helen. She seemed dearer to me than ever. I felt as if I could not let her go. I lay with my face hidden in her neck. Presently she said in the sweetest tone, "Oh, how comfortable I am. That last fit of coughing has tired me a little. I feel as if I could sleep. But don't leave me, Jane. I like to have you near me." "I'll stay with you, dear Helen. No one shall take me away." "Are you warm?" "Yes." "Good night, Jane." "Good night, Helen." She kissed me and I her, and we both soon slumbered. When I awoke, it was day. An unusual movement roused me. I looked up, and I was in somebody's arms. The nurse held me, and she was carrying me through a passage back to the dormitory. I was not reprimanded for leaving my bed. People had something else to think about. No explanation was afforded then to my many questions. But a day or two afterwards, I learned that Miss Temple, on returning to her own room at dawn, had found me laid in the little crib, my face against Helen Burns's shoulder, my arms around her neck. I was asleep, and Helen, she was dead. Her grave is in Brocklebridge churchyard. For 15 years after her death, it was only covered by a grassy mound. But now a gray marble tablet marks the spot, and inscribed with her name and the word Resurgam. Chapter 10. Hitherto I have recorded in detail the events of my insignificant existence to the first 10 years of my life. I have given almost as many chapters, but this is not to be a regular autobiography. I am only bound to invoke memory, where I know her responses will possess some degree of interest. Therefore, I will now pass the space of 8 years, almost in silence. A few lines are only necessary to keep up the links of connection. When the typhus fever had fulfilled its mission of devastation at Lowood, it gradually disappeared from thence. But not till its virulence and the number of its victims had drawn public attention on the school. Inquiry was made into the origin of the scourge, and by degrees various facts came out, which excited public indignation at such a high degree. The unhealthy nature of the site, the quantity and quality of the children's food, the brackish, fetid water used in its preparation, the pupils' wretched clothing and accommodations, all these things were discovered, and the discovery produced a result mortifying to Mr. Brocklehurst, but beneficial to the institution. Several wealthy and benevolent individuals in the country subscribed largely for the erection of a more convenient building in a better situation. New regulations were made, improvements in diet and clothing introduced. The funds of the school were entrusted to management of a committee. Mr. Brocklehurst, who, from his wealth and family connections, could not be overlooked, still retained the post of treasurer, but he was aided in the discharge of his duties by gentlemen of rather more enlarged and sympathizing minds. His office inspector, too, was shared by those who knew how to combine reason with strictness, comfort with economy, compassion with uprightness. The school was thus improved, became in time a truly useful and noble institution. I remained an inmate of its walls after its regeneration, for 8 years, 6 as a pupil and 2 as a teacher, and in both capacities I bear my testimony to its value and importance. During these 8 years, my life was uniform, but not unhappy, because it was not inactive. I had the means of an excellent education placed within my reach, a fondness for some of my duties, and a desire to excel in all, together with a great delight in pleasing my teachers, especially such as I loved, urged me on. I availed myself fully of the advantages offered me, and in time I rose to be the first girl of the first class. Then I was invested with the office of teacher, which I discharged with zeal for 2 years. But at the end of that time I was altered. Miss Temple, through all the changes, had thus far continued as superintendent of the seminary. To her instruction I owed the best part of my acquirements. Her friendship and society had been my continual solace. She had stood me in the stead of mother, governess, and latterly companion. At this period she married, removed with her husband to a distant county, and consequently had lost to me. From the day she left I was no longer the same. With her was gone every settled feeling, every association that made Lowood in some degree a home to me. I had imbibed from the harmonious thoughts that seemed much regulated, and the feelings to duty and order. I was quiet. I believed that I was content to the eyes of others, usually even to my own. I appeared a disciplined and subdued character. But destiny, in the shape of Reverend Mr. Naismith, came between me and Miss Temple. I saw her in her traveling dress step into a post-chaise shortly after the marriage ceremony. I watched the chaise mount the hill and disappear beyond its brow, and then retired to my own room, and there spent in solitude the greatest part of the half-holiday granted in honor of the occasion. I walked about the chamber most of the time. I imagined myself only to be regretting my loss, and thinking how to repair it. But when my reflections were concluded, and I looked up and found that the afternoon was gone, and evening far advanced, another discovery dawned on me, namely, that in the interval that I had undergone a transforming process, that my mind had put off all that had borrowed of Miss Temple, or rather that she had taken with her the serene atmosphere that I had been breathing in her vicinity. And now that I was left in my natural element, and beginning to feel the stirring of old emotions, it did not seem as if a prop were withdrawn, but rather as if a motive were gone. It was not the power to be tranquil which had failed me, but the reason for tranquillity was no more. My world had for some years been in Lowood. My experience had been its rules and systems. Now I remembered that the real world was wide, and that a varied field of hopes and fears, of sensations and excitements, awaited those who had courage to go forth into its expanse, to seek real knowledge of life amidst its perils. I went to my window and opened it, and looked out. There were the two wings of the building. There was the garden, and there were the skirts of Lowood. There was the hilly horizon. My eyes passed on other objects to rest on those more remote. The blue peaks, it was those I longed to surmount. All within their boundary of rock and heath seemed prison ground, exile limits. I traced the white road winding around the base of one of the mountains and vanishing in a gorge between the two. How I longed to follow it farther. I recalled the time when I had traveled that very road in a coach. I remembered descending that hill at twilight. An age seemed to have elapsed since that day, which I brought to me first to Lowood, and I had never quitted it since. My vacations had all been spent at school. Mrs. Reed had never sent for me to Gateshead. Neither she nor any of her family had ever been to see me. I had no communication by letter or message with the outer world. School rules, school duties, school habits, and notions, and voices, and faces, and phrases, and costumes, and preferences, and antipathies, which was all I knew of existence. And now I felt that it was not enough. I tired of the routine of 8 years in one afternoon. I desired liberty. For liberty I grasped. For liberty I uttered a prayer. It seemed scattered on the wind, then faintly blowing. I abandoned it and framed a humbler supplication for change. Stimulus. That petition, too, seemed to sweep off into vague space. Then, I cried, half desperate, grant me at least a new servitude. Here a bell ringing the hour of supper called me downstairs. I was not free to resume the interrupted chain of my reflections till bedtime. Even then a teacher who occupied the same room with me kept me from the subject, to which I longed to recur, by a prolonged effusion of small talk. How I wished sleep would have silenced her. It seemed as if I could go back to the window with some inventive suggestion, but Miss Gryce snored finally at last. She was a heavy Welsh woman, and till now her habitual nasal strains have never been regarded by me in any other light than as a nuisance. Tonight I hailed the first deep notes with satisfaction. I was debarrassed of interruption. My half-effaced thought instantly revived. A new servitude. There is something in that, I soliloquized. I know there is, because it does not sound too sweet, and it does not like such words as liberty, excitement, enjoyment, and delightful sounds truly, but no more than the sounds for me, and so hollow and fleeting that is mere waste of time to listen to them. But servitude, that must be matter of fact. Anyone may serve. I may have served here 8 years. Now all I want is to serve elsewhere. Can I not get so much of my own will? Is not the thing feasible? Yes, yes. The end is not so difficult. If I had only a brain active enough to ferret out the means of attaining it. I sat up in bed by way of arousing this said brain. It was a chilly night. I covered my shoulders with a shawl, and then I proceeded to think again with all my might. What do I want? A new place in a new house, amongst new faces, under new circumstances? I want this because it is of no use wanting anything better. How do people get a new place? They apply to friends, I suppose. I have no friends. There are many others who have no friends, who must look about for themselves, and be their own helpers. And what is their resource? I could not tell. Nothing answered me. I then ordered my brain to find a response, and quickly. It worked and worked faster. I felt the pulses throb in my head and my temples. But for nearly an hour it worked in chaos, and no result became of its efforts. Feverish with vain labor, I got up and took a turn in the room, undrew the curtain and noted a star or two, shivered with cold and again crept to bed. A kind fairy in my absence had surely dropped the required suggestion in my pillow, for as I lay down, and it came quietly and naturally to my mind, "Those who want situations advertise. You must advertise in the Shire Herald. How? I know nothing about advertising. Replies rose smooth and prompt now. You must enclose the advertisement, and the money to pay for it under a cover directed to the editor of the Herald. You must put it, the first opportunity you have, into the post at Lowton. Answers must be addressed to J.E. At the post office there, you can go and inquire in about a week after you send your letter, if any are to come, and act accordingly. This scheme I went over twice, thrice. It was then digested in my mind. I had it in a clear, practical form. I felt satisfied, and I fell asleep. With earliest day, I was up. I had my advertisement written and closed and directed before the bell even rang to rouse the school, and it ran as thus. A young lady accustomed to tuition is desirous of meeting with a situation in a private family where the children are under 14. She is qualified to teach the usual branches of good English education, together with French, drawing, and music. Please address J.E., Post Office, Lowton, Shire. This document remained locked in my drawer all day. After tea, I then asked leave of the new superintendent to go to Lowton in order to perform some small commissions for myself, and one or two for my fellow teachers. Permission was readily granted, so I went. It was a walk of 2 miles, and the evening was wet, but the days were still long. I visited a shop or two, slipped the letter into the post office, and came back through heavy rain, with streaming garments, but with a relieved heart. The succeeding week seemed long. It came to an end at last, however, like all sublunary things, and once more, towards the close of a pleasant autumn day, I found myself afoot on the road to Lowton. A picturesque track it was, by the way, lying the roadside of Beck and through the sweetest curves of the dale. But that day I thought more of the letters that might or might not be waiting for me at the little burg, whither I was bound, than the charms of lea and water. My ostensible errand on this occasion was to get measured for a pair of shoes, so I was discharged at that business first, and when it was done, I stepped across the clean and quiet little street from the shoemaker's to the post office. It was kept by an old dame, who wore horned spectacles on her nose and black mittens on her hands. "Are there any letters for J.E.?" I asked. She peered at me over her spectacles, and then she opened a drawer and fumbled through its contents for a long time, so long that my hopes began to falter. At last, having held a document before her glasses for nearly 5 minutes, she presented it across the counter, accompanying the act by another inquisitive and mistrustful glance. It was for J.E. "Is there only one?" I demanded. "There are no more," she said, and I put it in my pocket and turned my face homeward. I could not open it then. Rules obliged me to be back by 8, and it was already 7:30. Various duties awaited me on my arrival. I had to sit with the girls during their hour of study. Then it was my turn to read prayers, to see them to bed, and afterwards I supped with the other teachers. Even when we finally retired for the night, the inevitable Miss Gryce was still my companion. We had only a short end of a candle in our candlestick, and I was dreaded lest she should talk till it was burnt out. Fortunately, however, the heavy supper that she had eaten produced a soporific effect. She was already snoring before I had finished undressing. There still remained an inch of a candle. I now took out my letter. The seal was initial F. I broke it. The contents were brief. "If J.E., who advertised in the Shire Herald of last Thursday, possesses the acquirements mentioned, and if she is in a position to give satisfactory references as to character and competency, a situation can be offered her where there is but one pupil, a little girl under 10 years of age, and where the salary is £30 per annum. J.E. is requested to send references, name, address, and all particulars to the direction as follows: Mrs. Fairfax, Thornfield, near Millicote, Shire. I examined the document long. The writing was old-fashioned and rather uncertain, like that of an elderly lady. This circumstance was satisfactory. A private fear had haunted me, that in thus acting for myself and by my own guidance, I ran the risk of getting into some scrape, and above all things, I wished the result of my endeavors to be respectable, proper, and réglé. I now felt that an elderly lady was no bad ingredient in the business that I had a hand on. Mrs. Fairfax. I saw her in a black gown and a widow's cap, frigid perhaps, but not uncivil, a model of elderly English respectability. Thornfield. That, doubtless, was the name of her house. A neat, orderly spot, I was sure, though I failed in my efforts to convince a corrective plan of premises. Millcote Shire. I brushed up my recollections of the map of England. Yes, I saw it, both the shire and the town. Shire was 70 miles nearer London than the remote country where I now resided. That was a recommendation to me. I longed to go where there was life and movement. Millcote was a large manufacturing town on the banks of the Eyre, a busy place enough, doubtless. So much the better. It would be a complete change, at least. Not that my fancy was much captivated by the idea of long chimneys and clouds of smoke, but I argued that Thornfield will probably be a good way from the town. There, the socket of the candle dropped, and the wick went out. The next day new steps were taken. My plans could no longer be confined to my own breast. I must impart them in order to achieve their success. Having thought and obtained an audience of the superintendent during the noontide recreation, I told her that I had a prospect of getting a new situation, where the salary would be double what I now received, and requested that she would break the matter for me to Mr. Brocklehurst, or some of the committee, and ascertain whether they would permit me to mention them as references. She obligingly consented to act as a mediatrix in the matter. The next day she laid the affair before Mr. Brocklehurst, who said that Mrs. Reed must be written to, as she was still my natural guardian. A note was accordingly addressed to that lady, who returned for answer that I might do as I pleased. She had long relinquished all interference in my affairs. This note went round of the committee, and at last, after that, it appeared to me the most tedious delay. Formal leave was given to me to better my condition if I could, and an assurance aided, that, as I had always conducted myself well, both as teacher and pupil at Lowood, a testimonial of my character and capacity, signed by the inspectors of the institution, should forthwith be furnished to me. This testimonial I accordingly received in about a month, forwarded a copy of it to Mrs. Fairfax, and got that lady's reply, stating that she had been satisfied, and fixing that day fortnight as the period for my assuming the post of governess in her house. I now busied myself in preparations. The fortnight passed rapidly. I had not a very large wardrobe, though it was adequate to my wants, and the last day sufficed to pack my trunk, the same that I had brought with me 8 years ago from Gateshead. The box was corded and the card nailed on. In half an hour the carrier was to call for it to take it to Lowton, whither I myself was to repair at an early hour the next morning to meet the coach. I had brushed my black stuff travelling dress, and prepared my bonnet, gloves, and muff, sought in all my drawers to see that no article was left behind, and now having nothing more to do, I sat down and tried to rest. I could not. Though I had been on foot all day, I could not now repose an instant. I was much too excited. A phase of my life was closing tonight, a new one opening tomorrow. Impossible to slumber in the interval. I must watch feverishly while the change was being accomplished. "Miss," said a servant who met me in the lobby, where I was wandering like a troubled spirit, A person below wishes to see you. The carrier, no doubt, I thought, and ran downstairs without inquiry. I was passing the back parlor and the sitting room for teachers, the door of which was half open, and to go to the kitchen when someone ran out. "It's her, I'm sure. I could have told her anywhere," cried the individual who stopped my progress and took my hand. I looked, and I saw a woman attired in a well-dressed servant matronly, yet still young and very good-looking, with black hair and eyes and a lively complexion. "Well, who is it?" she asked in a voice and a smile I half recognized. "You've not quite forgotten me, I think, Miss Jane." And in another second I was embracing and kissing her rapturously. "Bessie, Bessie, Bessie!" was all I could say. She half laughed and half cried, and we both went into the parlor. By the fire stood a little fellow of 3 years old, in a plaid frock and trousers. "That is my little boy," said Bessie directly. "Then you are married, Bessie?" "Yes, nearly 5 years since, to Robert Leaven, the coachman, and I've a little girl besides Bobby there, and that I've christened Jane." "Oh, you don't live at Gateshead?" "I live at the lodge, and the old porter has left." "Well, and how do they all get on? Tell me about everything about them, Bessie. Oh, but sit down first, and Bobby, come here and sit on my knee, will you?" But Bobby preferred sliding over to his mother. "You've not grown so tall, Miss Jane, nor so very stout," continued Mrs. Leaven. "I dare say that they've not kept you too well at school. Miss Reed is the head and the shoulders taller than you are, and Miss Georgiana will make 2 of you in one breath." "Georgiana is handsome, I suppose, Bessie?" "Very. She went up to London last winter with her mamma, and there everybody admired her, and a young lord fell in love with her. Oh, but his relations are against the match, and what do you think? He and Miss Georgiana made up to run away. Oh, but they were found out and stopped. It was Mrs. Reed who found them out. I believe that she was envious, and now she and her sister lead a cat and a dog life together. They are always quarrelling." "Well, and what of John Reed?" "Oh, well, he's not doing so good. Not as well as his mamma could wish. He went to college, and he got plucked. I think that is what they call it. And then his uncles wanted him to be a barrister and study the law, but he is a dissipated young man, and they can never make much of him, I think." "Well, what does he look like?" "Well, he is very tall. Some people call him a fine-looking young man, but he has such thick lips." "And Mrs. Reed?" "Oh, Mrs. looks stout and well enough in the face, but I think she's not quite easy in her mind. Mr. John's conduct does not please her, and she spends a great deal of money." "Did she send you here, Bessie?" "No, indeed. But I have long waited to see you, and when I heard that there would be a letter from you, and that you were going to another part of the country, I thought I'd just set off and get a look at you before you were quite out of my reach." "I'm afraid you are disappointed in me, Bessie." I said this laughing. I perceived that Bessie's glance, though it expressed regard, did no shape to denote admiration. "No, Miss Jane, not exactly. You are genteel enough. You look like a lady, and it is might as ever as I expected of you. You are no beauty as a child." I smiled at Bessie's frank answer. I felt that it was correct, but I confessed that I was not quite indifferent to its importance. At 18, most people wish to please, and the conviction that they have not an exterior likely to second that desire brings anything but gratification. "I dare say you are a clever one, though," continued Bessie, by way of solace. "What can you do? Can you play on the piano?" "A little." There was one in the room, and Bessie went and opened it, and then asked me to sit down and give her a tune. I played a waltz or two, and she was charmed. "The Miss Reeds could not play as well," she said exultingly. "I always said you would surpass them in learning, And can you draw? That is one of my paintings over the chimney piece. It was a landscape in watercolors, of which that I made a present to the superintendent, and in acknowledgment of her obliging mediation with the committee on my behalf, in which she had framed and glazed. Oh, well, that is beautiful, Miss Jane. It is as fine a picture as Miss Reed's drawing master could paint, let alone the young ladies themselves, who could not come near it. And have you learnt French? Yes, Bessie, I can both speak it and read it. And can you work on muslin and canvas? I can. Oh, you are quite a lady, Miss Jane. I knew you would be. You will get on whether your relations notice or you are not. There was something I did want to talk to you about. Have you ever heard of anything from your father's kinfolk, the Eyres? Never in my life. Well, you know, the missus always said that they were poor and quite despicable, and they may be poor, but I believe that they are much gentry as the Reeds are. For one day, nearly 7 years ago, a Mr. Eyre came to Gateshead and wanted to meet you. Oh, missus said you were at school 50 miles off, and he seemed so much disappointed, for he could not stay. He was going on a voyage to a foreign country, and the ship was to sail from London in a day or two. He looked quite a gentleman, and I believe that he was your father's brother. What foreign country was he going to, Bessie? Well, he was going to an island thousands of miles off, where they make wine, and the butler did tell me. Madeira, I suggested. Yes, that is it. That is the very word. So he went? Ah, yes. He did not stay many minutes in the house. Mrs. was very high with him, and she called him afterwards a sneaking tradesman. My Robert believes that he was a wine merchant. That is very likely, I returned, or perhaps a clerk or an agent of a wine merchant. Bessie and I then conversed about old times an hour longer, and then she was obliged to leave me. I saw her again for a few minutes the next morning at Lowton, while I was waiting for the coach. We parted finally at the door of the Brocklehurst Arms. There each went her separate way. She set off for the brow of Lowood Fell to meet the conveyance which was to take her back to Gateshead. I mounted the vehicle which was to bear me to new duties and a new life in the unknown environs of Millcote. All right, I think I can do one more chapter. Let's see how long it is. I don't know if I could do it if it's like 20 pages long, because that's going to hurt me. Oh yeah, this is a hefty one. So I think I'm going to save it for tomorrow. So with that being said, if you did enjoy listening to me read more of Jane Eyre, please feel free to like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream pretty regularly, and I do stream on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. So if it's something that you liked listening to and kind of being here to hang out with me, please do like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream very regularly, and I will be continuing on with this reading tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you want, you could come and join me, and we can read more about Jane Eyre together. So with that being said, I hope you all stay safe and stay geeky as always.